Hello and welcome to episode number 53 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam.
I'm Sahil.
And we are recording this for you on Tuesday night, Tuesday evening, really. But tonight in real life is going to be the first game of the World Series. That's kind of exciting.
Yeah, no, it was. I didn't really predict that Astros Braves would be the matchup. I thought the Astros had a pretty decent chance of making it to the World Series, but I remember telling somebody a couple weeks ago after the wild card games that the Braves were the one NL team I didn't see making the World Series, and here they are. So. As a Freddie Freeman and Max Fried fantasy owner, I'm delighted. And also as a Jose Altuve, Carlos Correa, Michael Brantley, Jose Urquidy, and Zach Greinke fantasy owner, I'm delighted. Nice to see my team represented in the World Series.
As a guy who likes Adam Duvall, I'm delighted, and as a guy who likes Dusty Baker, I'm delighted. So
Yeah, definitely happy for Dusty. He definitely deserves a World Series. I'm trying to think, because you mentioned Adam Duvall, former Red. I'm trying to think if there are any former Orioles on either of these teams. I know Nick Markakis retired after last year, so he's no longer on the Braves. But I can't.
I'm sure both teams have like a couple relievers who have been on the Orioles at one point. And we're on the team at some point this year. Maybe they're not on the World Series roster, but they could still get a ring or something, for example.
Oh, I'm sure there are.
For example, former Red Kevin Quackenbush pitched a third of an inning for the Dodgers this year, so he would have gotten a ring.
Kevin Quackenbush. Love that. Well, there's nobody on the Astros World Series roster who was an Oriole, and there is nobody on the Braves World Series roster who was an Oriole. But also shout out to former Yellow champ Eddie Rosario, who has netted me Jack Flaherty and Brandon Woodruff and Max Fried. So. Dansby Swanson's here too. I forgot about him. And Austin Riley was the Yellow champ for like all of 20 seconds, as was William Contreras. Oh, and how can I forget Will Smith?
Will Smith.
Yeah, as a Yellow champ. I've owned a couple of their relievers at different parts of the season, other ones, but nobody for a really significant amount of time. But yeah, this is gonna be a fun World Series. Who do you think's gonna win?
I think I've got the Astros. I think they're the better team. The Braves. I mean, they've been missing Acuna for the whole playoffs, but they are still missing their best player. I think it's tough though because the Astros rotation is really kind of beat up. So if the Braves can put some offense together, they could put a couple games out of reach. My gut still says the Astros.
Yeah, I'm gonna put my money on the Braves. I mean, I just think they just have all this momentum right now. They're playing really well. Sometimes I feel like you have that team of destiny, and they kind of remind me of Conor, and the Astros kind of remind me of Erik, and I think that means Erik / the Astros are probably gonna win, but I don't know. I feel pretty good about this Braves team. I think Max Fried and Charlie Morton are probably better than any starter the Astros are going to throw out, and I think that's a difference maker for me.
I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, what this means for the league is that what is it? A week after the World Series ends, a week or 10 days after that, we will be having our the dreaded roster crunch. We'll be forced to cut everyone off our IR, and we're going to kind of do a little bit of a preview of that next week, kind of more in depth, but it's going to be something that we're going to all have to keep an eye on. And I bet it'll lead to some trades too, just with not wanting to have to cut some guys.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, if you're one of the teams kind of at the bottom of the standings, I think this can really benefit you because I think you'll be able to get some quality players at cheaper prices than you normally would. Although you could also wait and see if some of them get cut. And I know you and I were talking about this off the air. It seems like this year, a lot of teams have more players that they need to cut than usual. And I think it's going to lead to an even tighter roster crunch. I mean, I don't recall having this type of roster crunch like I have right now. Last year, I have 36 players on my roster and I need to get down to 30. And I have an idea of some of the guys I can cut and feel all right about, but there's definitely a couple of guys that I think I could get some pretty decent trade value for. So I don't really have an incentive to cut them if I don't have to. So I'm sure you feel like you're in a similar position. So, I mean, it's tricky.
No, I'm absolutely. I have to cut 5 guys. Erik's going to have to cut 8 guys. I believe Conor will have to cut 5, if I'm remembering right. But either way, I think it kind of drives the price on a lot of people down. Certainly now, and with a lot of guys going to free agency. So really, if you are a team that's a little thin on the major league roster, you can make some moves at a cheaper price, and it's just really interesting.
Absolutely. And hopefully the trade market picks up soon. I mean, I know like I took a couple of weeks of not really looking at my team after the conclusion of the playoffs, and I thought it kind of got me to reset a bit and kind of get a fresh set of eyes on this team. So maybe other people feel the same way and it'll lead to some trades, but it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess you could call this segment our the preview to our roster crunch preview. but yeah, no, I think it's going to be an interesting roster crunch, and we're going to pick some people who will be there. There are a lot of people who we're going to think could be cut. And I don't know. I'm sure there will be some surprising guys, and I'm sure there will be some guys we're surprised didn't get cut. Like, for example, I remember last year we were kind of both thinking Corey Kluber might be on the chopping block from Anthony's team, but he was not cut, and he ended up signing on with the Yankees and putting together an okay season.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a few names last year. I think there's going to be some surprises, both of, like you said, players who will be cut and players that don't be cut. And I'm excited to see it. I also think last year there was a lot more trade movement in October. I think partially because, like, what else do we have to do during COVID? I know I didn't really have much else to do other than law school work, which I like to procrastinate. So, I think that this period is going to be a little more condensed this year. So I think we'll see some more chaos. And, hopefully it kind of resembles a trade deadline a little bit, because that was a lot of fun.
A lot of trades last year, just with, I guess, not having much else to do. And with this year, people being allowed more to do things. And also with the hockey league existing, that didn't exist last October, November either. So just kind of a lot of things kind of bringing us back down to earth. Not that I don't expect us to make a lot of trades. I know this league. But yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of movement building up to that roster deadline.
Absolutely. One side note, when you said the preview to our preview, it made me think of the Office episode where Dwight named himself the assistant to the assistant regional manager. So he was both the regional manager and the number 3 in charge. I don't know why that made me think of that, but I love the characterization of the preview to the roster cut preview. Great job.
Is the preview or the preview?
The preview or the Oh no. Yeah, we need to start naming every episode like the X or the Y. Like,
that's an idea.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh.
It's tough because we've done 52 episodes not in that format, and it doesn't really, the thing is, it doesn't really give you a good idea as to what the episode's about. So
Yeah.
It's kind of a style versus function debate that I'm not sure um what the right answer to is.
No, yeah, I feel like it would only work in like very select instances. Like I don't know. We're gonna do grades here in a second for the season, the A plus or the F.
We could do that. It's like how every episode of Friends is titled "The One Where X," or
Yeah.
every Seinfeld episode is "The X," and I'm sure there are plenty other shows that follow a similar format, but it's the something or the something.
Yeah, I feel like it kind of locks us in a bit more than like just having the at the beginning or the one with at the beginning.
Yeah, because like what if there's an episode where we just draft preview? I'm not sure how the Marcelo Meyer or the Henry Davis.
Yeah.
All right, and we were worried we wouldn't have enough banter to fill a full episode. Here we are.
Yeah. No, we always find a way. There's always something that comes up.
But yeah, Sahil, like you teased, today's episode, we are going to be giving a grade to each team based on how their season went. And this is going to be graded on a curve. So it'll be relative to the expectations for this team going into the year. Because otherwise it'd be boring and just like, oh, all of the good teams get A's, all the bad teams get F's. So this will be a little more fun than that, and I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm very excited too. And honestly, I thought it was kind of hard trying to figure out the exact criteria. So, I mean, I kind of went through and looked both kind of where the roster was at before the season and after the season. I looked at record, I looked at improvements throughout the season or different trends, different roster moves and trades that they made to kind of set themselves up either for the future if they're a rebuilding team or to win now if they were a win now team. I think this is all very subjective and I'm really interested to see kind of where we fall here because I don't think we're going to, be 12 for 12 and have an identical grade.
Absolutely not. No, I'd be surprised if we have like more than 3 that are the same exactly.
Yeah. Just looking through my list, I think we're going to have, I think we'll have 1, 2. Yeah, I think we'll have 3.
All right.
3 grades that are the same. That's my prediction.
Okay. Well, we're going to see, and we're going to start from the bottom and go up to the top with our 2 finalists being the final 2 teams we go through. And so the first team we're going to talk about is Daniel and Greg. And what was your grade for this team?
Yeah, I gave them a C plus. And I think there are a couple of factors that went into that. The one place where they really knocked it out of the park this year came from free agent pickups. I mean, they picked up Cedric Mullins, which he just won the best hitter pickup for in season. They picked up Brandon Crawford, who maybe doesn't quite fit the competitive timeline of this team, but boy, did he have a really great season. Some of the issues I had with them kind of came with the trades that they made, and primarily the one that really got to me was the Sandy Alcantara move. I personally thought that was the most lopsided trade in season. They got Ronnie Mauricio and Chris Flexen. Flexen's an average starter, and I think I've made it pretty clear that I'm not the biggest Ronnie Mauricio fan. And I thought that they made, a couple, okay deals. I mean, I think they got some decent prospects in the Dansby Swanson deal, although I largely think that, that deal worked out pretty well for me. And then obviously their record, I think of a pretty decent roster, but, to finish in last place, I just, wasn't really overall impressed. So, I think had they not picked up Cedric Mullins and Brandon Crawford, this team probably gets like something into the D range or maybe a C minus for me. But those pickups are just so good that, I mean, I think that's enough. getting a top 20-25 dynasty asset for free, and Cedric Mullins alone is enough to give him this grade.
Wow. So I think we're going to have some very different ratings. I gave this team a D plus.
Okay.
That kind of comes from them. Really, I mean, their ownership situation is kind of sticky going forward. And they made that Alcantara move that you said is just really one of the worst trades of the season. I said it was the worst. And they finished below expectations. We were expecting them to finish in the 10th range. They finished in 12th. And the only thing that really did save them from a worse grade was those acquisitions you mentioned, Crawford and Mullins. But even still, I think Crawford's the type of guy that you could really, if you're out of contention at the trade deadline, shop him around. He doesn't fit this team's competitive timeline. You could get a good prospect. You could probably trade him to me. I would have traded for him. Thinking about it now, I guess I didn't reach out about him, but if you trade him to a team such as me that needs a little bit of middle infield depth, and get a prospect back, that's a win for your team because you got him for free. So really, there's just, I mean, if this team were more active and committed, and if they finished a little better in the standings, they would have done a lot better. But since they didn't do that, they get a D plus from me.
Yeah, I'm going to revise my ranking after thinking about this a little more, and I think I'm going to give them a C minus. And the reason is I think you raised a pretty good point about Brandon Crawford, but also that a couple other older guys in this roster that I wish they had traded away. And Yoli Gurriel is definitely one of them. I mean, 37, having a fantastic season. First base was strangely a little thin this year. And I know there's like competitors like Anthony, for example, starting Carlos Santana at first base. I'm sure he would have loved to have a guy like Yoli Gurriel to kind of stabilize that position. So, yeah, I mean, I think I'm probably going to Justin Turner's another one kind of in that range. And Cody Bellinger definitely, took a step back this year. So, yeah, I'm going to revise my grade and give him a C minus. I think I was being a little generous when I first made that grade, especially given some of the other grades that I'm throwing out here. So you gave him a D plus. I gave him a C minus. Are you ready to move on to the next team?
I am. This is Yuki, correct?
Yes. Do you want to start out with your grade for him?
I will. I gave Yuki a D. This was kind of a tough one because it could have gone in a lot of different ways, but I know that we both were low on this team going into the year. But the fact of the matter is they were a playoff team last year, and Yuki thought he could be a playoff team again, and that very much was not the case. And a lot of his pitchers just were not good this year, and that caused his team to, finish 5-14-2. There's not really a lot to look at in starting pitchers as for now, although you can certainly talk about Luis Garcia's taking a step forward, but maybe Ian Anderson took half a step back. Clayton Kershaw was hurt for a decent chunk of the year. Dallas Keuchel's kind of broken. So there's some of that. There's the fact that he didn't trade away Buster Posey, which is maybe the most mind-boggling move there was, or I guess it's the most mind-boggling non-move there was. But still, you can talk about the fact that guys like Randy Rosarena proved to be real. Austin Riley had a phenomenal year, took a huge step forward. But then on the other hand, Carter Kieboom did not take the step forward he was hoping for. And Abraham Toro kind of struggled down this stretch, and Josh Donaldson, no, he's fine. And Taylor Walls didn't hit when he got called up. So there's a lot of pieces that he can build around, but I don't think he did what he needed to do to build a team around them, and that's why I gave this team a D for this year.
Yeah, I was going to give this team an F. I'm not going to lie. That was the first grade I gave them, but I ended up giving them a D minus just for two reasons. One, the Austin Riley breakout. He's fantastic. Shout out to Yuki for kind of holding on to him despite, kind of the rough start to his career after he had that really solid first month in the majors. And also, the fact that Randy Arozarena was kind of able to keep it up. And Brandon Lau ended up recovering after a slow start to the season to make that trade look good. And then the fact he was able to dump Eugenio Suarez and got a legitimate prospect in Gabriel Moreno from me, and a pretty decent piece of Luis Arias, I think, showed that he did some good this season. I also like the Abraham Toro pickup from Erik. I was kind of surprised Erik sold him for as low as he did. But literally everything else I hated. I mean, I've been banging this drum all along. Buster Posey should have been traded. Josh Donaldson should have been traded. David Peralta should have been traded. Buster or Austin Nola should have been traded. Like literally, like just pick one catcher. How hard is it to pick one catcher? He has like 9 catchers. How hard is it to be like, this is the catcher I'm going to stick with? The other ones don't provide enough utility to keep on the roster. If you really want to be a 2 catcher guy, fine. Don't be a 4 catcher guy. What do they always say in the NFL? If you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have any quarterbacks. If you have 4 catchers, you don't have a catcher. I mean, I guess he technically does because he has JT Realmuto, but like still, it's not a good way to build a roster. His rotation, has a couple solid young pieces. Like I really like Luis Garcia. I really like Ian Anderson. John Gray's okay. Caprillian's okay. Cal Quantrill's a nice pickup. That helps raise his grade. But like, should have traded Kenta Maeda before the trade deadline when he actually had value. And then he got hurt. And he lost his window to trade him. I definitely would have traded away Clayton Kershaw. I think his asking price on him is a bit too high at the moment. I think he's trying to sell Kershaw, as if he had the value he did 3 years ago, but his value is a little depressed now with the injury history and the age. Ian Kennedy is probably somebody you should have sold. There's no reason you need like a 30-some-year-old reliever sitting on your team. Same with Kenley Jansen. I mean, he's kind of, and the farm system's not that good. So he's kind of stuck in some sort of purgatory right now. And I think he's a lot of work this offseason if he wants to build out of it. I think one of the things I said in an earlier podcast was that if Yuki played his cards right, he could speed up his rebuild by 2 years. And he didn't choose to do that. And, while I think there's going to still be some of the demand for his players in the offseason, I think he's already missed one window. And, I hope he doesn't miss another, especially some of these older players losing value every day. And he's already lost one trade chip from before the deadline to now. That is Kenta Maeda. So, yeah, I think a D minus, and maybe that's even a little too aggressive, but I mean, there was very little I liked about Yuki's season this year.
No, totally. It was a rough year for them. Moving on now, we have Alex and Zach, the Benintendies Chicken Tendies. What is your rating for this team?
Yeah, I give them a B. And I've made it no secret on this podcast that I really like the direction that their team is going. Willie Adames was a huge pickup for them. Brandon Nimmo, I think, is going to pay off next year. I really think Jorge Mateo is a guy to watch out for next year. They picked him up as a free agent after the Orioles acquired him, and I really like him. They have a lot of fun young starting pitchers. I mean, Casey Mize, Framber Valdez, Freddie Peralta really broke out this year. Julio Urias is very solid. I think Adbert Alzolay, I was listening to a podcast this week that compared him to Freddie Peralta just in his pitching style, and I kind of buy that. And I think there could be some room for growth there. Logan Gilbert and Josiah Gray are really solid, and this farm system has really improved. And I know that they traded for a couple of these guys during the season. I'm really high on Joe Ryan. And I think he could do, really solid next year in that Minnesota rotation where there's not a lot of competition. Riley Green had a really solid year. CJ Abrams is a solid prospect. They got Marco Luciano in the middle of the season. So there's a lot to like. The thing that knocked them down a bit for me was one, I mean, they're obviously coming from a playoff berth to, only finishing with 5 wins, which is disappointing. Although I think kind of like Yuki, there was some regression to be expected. I wasn't totally in love with their offense. I mean, Gary Sanchez is like, okay. Jonathan VR, had some moments with the stolen bases, but he's not really providing much else value. Josh Bell had a bad year. Will Myers had a bad year. Tyler Naquin, I don't really think is like a big long-term option, although he surprisingly had a better year than I thought. And the Hae-Sung Kim pickup didn't really pan out this year. And I know they drafted him early, which, kind of continues this trend of foreign players being drafted, within the top 4 to 6 picks of the first round of our rookie draft and not really panning out. And the other thing was there's some trades that they made, which I just thought were kind of egregiously bad. The Robbie Ray for Ryan McMahon and Brusar Gratterall deal just still hurts looking at that. Like that trade just makes no sense to me. I think they could have gotten a lot more for a Cy Young front runner and a player who was probably the best pitcher in the trade market. I thought the Dom Smith deal didn't make a lot of sense, especially with them cutting Bader. And I feel like they could have gotten more for both Machado and Scherzer. And I didn't like the Adolis Garcia pickup. Sorry. Well, I like them trading away Adolis Garcia. I wasn't totally in love with the package that they got back for Scherzer and Garcia. So that's where I'm at with them. Also, I mean, if you're looking even slightly back to the offseason, trading away Brandon Woodruff was probably not the right move either. So that's why I give him a B.
Yeah, so I gave this team a C+. I'm a little less high on them going forward than you are. Not that I don't think they have a decent foundation. But really, there aren't a lot of young hitters on this team that I'm confident in going forward. I mean, Brendan Rodgers had I wouldn't call it a breakout, but definitely a better season than he's ever had before. But other than that, and Ryan Mountcastle, who hit 33 homers, but with a 307 on base, there's not a lot that you can build on that's at the major league level, I mean, Robbie Grossman was really solid this year, but he's not a long-term guy. Same with Tyler Naquin. And Willy Adames turned out to be a great move. I'm kicking myself for not getting him. And Brandon Nimmo, he's a little bit older than some of the young guys, but he's a good piece. And on the other hand, though, I will say, yeah, like you said, the young starting pitchers, Urias, Peralta, were great. Mize had a good, not great year, I would say. And Framber Valdez obviously was awesome. So there's some guys here for sure. And the farm system, they were definitely boosted by trading for Emerson Hancock and Marco Luciano. So good moves there. But overall, they performed about to expectation. Some guys got better, some guys got worse. And they've kickstarted their rebuild a little bit, but I wouldn't say this season was exactly a success for them, and that's why I think C+ is appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, I thought that they made some improvements over the course of the year with respect to their record that I really liked, and I think I'm really getting caught up in their rotation. Because I think that that's kind of the hardest thing to build in a dynasty league. But like, yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with the hitters. Like their hitters are definitely trailing their pitchers, and unless they kind of improve their offense this offseason, this team's not going anywhere. They're probably going to hang around the periphery of the playoff hunt. But after starting 0-5, they basically won 500 the rest of the year, 5, 6, and 5. So there is potential here.
There is potential.
Yeah, we'll see if they realize it, but there is potential. All right, next team is Andrew. What grade did you give Andrew? I'll let you start this time.
I gave Andrew, and mind you, this is a team that finished 6-14-1. I gave Andrew a B plus. I thought he had a great season. Definitely performed at like the 90th, 95th percentile of what this team had as expectations going into the year. And they, first of all, Andrew being active the whole year definitely helps. Some teams trail off, some owners trail off, and you kind of lose some steam in terms of making good moves. Andrew did not. And he's got a good core here with Will Smith, Ozzy Albies, and Jake Cronenworth. And I mean, Cabrian Hayes didn't have a great year, but if he bounces back and is healthy for a full year, then you can throw him in there as well. I talked last week about how great of a season Brian Reynolds had. And then Jesus Sanchez, I know he's finally up. He's been traded plenty of times. I know he torched the Reds when he played them. I guess his full season numbers weren't as great. And scrolling down, Tyler Stevenson. I mean, he was a waiver claim. That's a great person to have on your team. I think, in my opinion, as a Reds fan, I'm maybe kind of leaning towards him moving to first base and taking over for Joey Votto eventually. Which would be great for Andrew so that he can hold on to Smith and Stevenson. So kind of a lot of hitters breaking out at the same time. Even Luis Urias had a decent season. So there's a lot to like about this team. We were expecting this team to go like 2-21 or 2-19. I guess that's how it would work. 3 wins. But they won 6 games. They were a playoff team midway through the season. German Marquez looked all right. Even Kyle Freeland was okay. Not amazing. I think the pitching is definitely a weak spot, but they've got a good farm system. They're going to be picking high again this year. I think this team did a lot better than we both thought they would. I mean, they were unanimous worst team in the league by just about everyone, including Andrew. And they put together a respectable season, and I'm looking forward to seeing them going forward.
Yeah, this is one of the places where we gave teams the same grade. I also gave Andrew a B plus. I mean, and not only did he build a solid core, but I think he did a really good job on the trade market. I really liked his move to trade away Kevin Gausman when his value was at his highest to get Tariq Skubal in a first round pick. I think Skubal is going to be a solid pitcher to kind of anchor his rotation for the next 2 years. I really liked his move to trade away Marcus Stroman, Hansel Robles, and Andrew Chafin. I mean, I think Josh Jung, Jesus Sanchez, getting Ruthvik and Nick's 2022 first was huge. Even trading away Chris Sale right before the season started, actually worked out for them pretty nicely. He was able to get Kevin Gausman out of that deal and obviously turn Gausman into a lot more. So, I mean, for all the reasons you said, they've built a nice offensive core. And they also have a couple of, decent young pitchers here. And I think the farm has some very solid pieces. I mean, Torkelson obviously is going to come up and hopefully be really good for them. Reed Detmers, Kyber Ruiz, Nick Lodolo, Josh Jung, Francisco Alvarez, JJ Baudet. So, and like you said, the high picks. I think this is one of the best case scenarios for them this summer. And I'm pretty excited about this team moving forward. I think that they're kind of following a Conor-like path here. And, maybe within a couple seasons, they're really competing. I think we call this a 5-year rebuild. Last offseason, I don't think this is a 5-year rebuild.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this team could be competitive and far shorter than that if they play their cards right. If some of these guys come up and do well, kind of immediately, such as like Ruiz, Lodolo, Blade. So I Yeah, I agree. This team's got a lot to be excited about. They got a good owner.
Absolutely, yeah. Good owner, good setup. And I mean, there's so many pieces we didn't even touch on, like players that, like, I think that's just proof. This team has a bright future ahead of them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And up next is Ruthvik and Nick. Is that correct?
Yep. I'll start this time. I gave him a C. And this might be a little unfair just because they really got hit by the injury bug. I mean, Beaker and DeGrom and Acuna going down. Bregman missed good chunks of the season. And that's 4 of their best 5 players. I mean, it's hard to miss 4 of your best 5 players for most of the season and do well. But there are a couple other things beyond the injuries that kind of made me put them down low. I mean, obviously the difference between their performance last year and this year, they were in the semifinals last year and came damn close to making it to the finals. This year, I just not even making it to the playoffs is a disappointment. I identified them as a team at the end of last year that I thought kind of they had everything go right for them. And I thought that there was going to be some regression, but I thought the regression would still make them a playoff team. And even as of the midseason power rankings that we did, I had them still as making the playoffs. I wasn't a fan of a lot of the trades that they made. I've been banging the drum all along for them to kind of turn some of this pitcher depth into more hitters. And they've kind of done a little bit of that, but not really. I like the concept of them going out and acquire and trading away Salvador Perez at the peak of his value. And honestly, it's crazy to me because I think his value peaked even higher after the trade deadline, which, I mean, he couldn't have known of and obviously wouldn't have been able to have traded him at that point. But I wasn't really happy with the return that he got. He got Jose Barrios back, and it's not like he just gave up Sal Perez. I mean, he also gave up Aaron Civale, who's shown that he could be a competent major league starting pitcher, and he gave up a first-round pick and Luis Medina. I've explained last week when we were talking about the awards, I like Barrios. I don't think Barrios is ever going to be an ace, but I think Barrios is a very solid number 2 starting pitcher. And I just think that he could have sold higher. I think he had better packages that were available to him. In of the other trades that he made, I mean, if we're looking at this, Mackenzie Gore, his stock has really fallen off. And to give him up for, or to get him and Elvis Martinez as kind of the main pieces, or Zach Allen and Jose Abreu, I don't really know. Like, I wonder if maybe he could have gotten another piece. I did like the Chris Sale trade. I'll give him that. And I did think he sold well in Tommy Pham earlier in the year, only getting Hosmer and Dylan Moore. And I know Pham really crashed on the stretch, but he was really hot at that point. So I don't necessarily like that. And I just think because of those trades and because of how far he fell, I mean, I think a C is warranted. And I think he still has a lot of the pieces he needs to win, but I think it's the same as last offseason. He needs to build out a full lineup to be able to really compete. And absent that, I don't think this team's going to compete for a championship. I think they're going to compete for a playoff spot. They might even be the favorites to get like the 5 or the 6 seed next year, assuming they're healthier. But I don't think this is a team with a higher ceiling the way they're constructed right now without, a lot of their major offensive pieces.
So it's funny that you said that you thought you might be being harsh by giving them a C, because I gave this team a big fat F.
Oh, wow.
I think, just plainly, they had expectations of being a top 4 team, and they completely failed those expectations. They Yeah, injuries had something to do with it, but they still weren't able to overcome those. Um, and I mean, they finished in the eighth spot. They weren't even really close to the playoffs at the end of the year. And it's just not at all what this team was hoping to be going into the year, or even after week one, when I think they won week one against a pretty solid team, right?
Yeah, I think they started out the season like 3-0 and then kind of caught,
Yeah,
or 2
no, exactly. So
Yeah.
this team really tanked in the middle to back stretch of the season. And you were talking about the Barrios trade. I think that was just not what this team needed to do. And they really did not solve their lineup issues at all. They're still starting. Um, well, Travis Darno at catcher.
Yeah, that trade made no sense to me.
France is the top second baseman. They've got, I guess, Brandon Marsh is. I mean, he's a good prospect, but he's not like a fantasy relevant outfielder right this second. Dylan Moore is still on this team. Willie Calhoun is still on this team. And then Keston Hira just kind of fell off a cliff this year. So this team did not address its issues, and they completely failed to meet expectations. This season was a loss for them. I gave it a. So I was a lot harsher than you were. I gave them an F.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, you said that, they weren't able to overcome injuries. I mean, if you lost Juan Soto and Vlad and Bueller and Wheeler for the season, I think that you might sneak into the playoffs, but like, I don't think that, we would be talking about you as a championship contender. Number one. And then I think number two, they made kind of the conscious decision to start selling some of these assets. And once they did that, things could have gone differently had they kept them, but ultimately not keeping them, I think kind of maybe made the difference in some of these matchups. I mean, if you look at the end of the season that Sal Perez had, I'm sure he could have had a difference in some of these matchups. I mean, that being said, they did get blown out a couple of times pretty badly. So maybe it wouldn't have had as big of an impact, but I think this team with a healthy, even if like three of those four guys I mentioned were healthy, so like even if like Acuna and Bregman and like one of Bieber and DeGrom was healthy, like I think this team probably sneaks into the back half of the playoffs. But it's hard to penalize them too much for the injuries. I feel like, I mean, maybe I could have gone like a C- or something, but like I didn't feel comfortable going below that. So that's kind of my rebuttal to you.
Okay, yeah, I guess.
I mean, I see your perspective though. I mean, I think an F is slightly harsh. I mean, I probably would have gone for something like, if you're giving Daniel outside Greg and Yuki a D plus. I mean, I don't see how you put Ruthvik necessarily below them. But I don't know. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't. I guess. I just think they really could have done a lot more, even though their hands were tied. But moving on to the team that finished it.
Let me say one more thing, and then we can move on. Had that Sal Perez deal, instead of for a solid young pitcher like Barrios, been for a solid young hitter comparable to Barrios, I think I would have given them a higher grade. Because I think they totally made the right decision in trading Sal Perez at the peak of his value, but totally missed the boat on the type of player that they needed to acquire. I just wanted to add that. Let's move on to the next team.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And the next team is Clayton and Jake. Yeah, and I gave this team a C plus. I think we were both kind of expecting them to be right in the 5 through 7 range. They finished 7th. And this was a really tricky one to judge because they made some good moves and they made some short-sighted moves. Maybe trading away Marco Luciano wasn't great, but they also acquired a lot of guys I like. And they did start out slow and they made a big playoff push, but they did just fall short right at the end. And their pick in the lottery would have been number 3, and they had traded that away. I also think that this team's farm system looks a lot weaker without Luciano. They have a couple guys. Cade Cavalli is solid. Christian Hernandez. Mick Abel had a good season in the minors, but really there aren't any, unless you count O'Neal Cruz, there aren't any big name guys with Luciano gone with star potential. So this team is a little bit in win now mode, and they didn't quite get there. Although I certainly wouldn't say that they had a bad season, finishing 10-9-2 and being in the playoffs up until the final push. And having guys such as Matt Olson have a good season. Hunter Renfroe had a better season than a lot of people were expecting. They've had him since May. And then like Alcantara, trading for him was a great move. Luis Castillo was good. DeSclafani had a great season. They picked him up back in April. But on the whole, this team was just kind of this year. And they have a lot to be confident moving forward. But I think C+ is a good spot for them, maybe even in the B- territory.
Yeah, we're continuing this trend of you being a little harsher than I am. I gave them a B. I think it's like a B minus, like kind of like right on that line. It was impressive to me that they started the season off as bad as they did, and they were, in the driver's seat for getting a playoff spot going into the last week, and then unfortunately the wins didn't really go in their direction, and they didn't make it. Not having number 3 overall is really going to hurt. I think you're right. They did give up a couple good prospects, but I think they might have been smart for getting off Mackenzie Gore when they did, when he still had kind of some name value, because he just had a terrible season. Giving up Luciano is tough, but Machado is still an elite player. I thought they won the DL Hall trade. I've already talked about the Alcantara trade. I think they did okay in getting Carrasco. I mean, they definitely needed some depth in that rotation. And the one move that really baffles me for them, though, is the Luke Voigt, Kyle Lewis, Mick Abel, and Anthony's 2022 third for Lance Lynn, Zach Greinke, Bayron Lora, and Cam's 2022 second deal. I mean, Voigt, it was very good last year, and it's funny because I think at the time I liked this trade for them in terms of a rebuild or a retool, but Kyle Lewis's stock has kind of diminished a bit for me, and I think Luke Voigt's like a solid player, but like I think he's definitely one that you can kind of live without. I think there's a decent amount of comparable players to him, and I think he seems like he's a hard time staying healthy. I like their offense. I mean, Matt Olson, Manny Machado, Bo Bichette, Jose Abreu, JD Martinez, Jordan Alvarez, Jorge Soler kind of bounced back at the end there. Hunter Renfroe had a nice season. They definitely had their disappointments. I mean, Gleyber Torres has been a major bust, and that Wander Franco deal, boy, is that looking bad.
Yeah.
They're going to regret that one for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I hate Javi Baez. I think that's been pretty documented. The reason I gave him kind of put him in the BB minus range really is because of their pitching staff. Alcantara's great, but like everybody else is a question mark. Like Frankie, and I guess Frankie Montas had like a solid season when it was all said and done, but he had kind of a slow start. So I'll take that back. I think he's their second solid starter there. But like Gallen was not coming off the best season. Carrasco really struggled to start out his season, and then had turned in 2 clunkers down the stretch. DeSclafani was solid, but is he going to be able to keep this up? Corbin was a disaster. Heaney was cut. I don't even know why he's still on their roster. Steven Matz was okay. Dylan Bundy was a disaster. Spencer Howard was a disaster. Clevenger, Strasburg were hurt all year. Alex Wood is a perpetual injury threat, and indeed he is sitting under IL. They have one like top tier reliever in Edwin Diaz. I mean, Kendall Graveman was like solid, but like Colomé I don't really trust at this stage of the game. So I think they have some of the, building blocks in Olsen and Machado and Bichette and Abreu, Martinez, Alvarez, and I think that Luis Castillo is another one, and Alcantara, Montas. So, you have 3 starting pitchers there. While I think they have kind of that solid base, I'm just not convinced that they have the rest of the team that's necessary at the moment to compete. I think Jake's a very good manager for this team, and I think that he is going to help, boost this team up a bit. I think there's definitely some moves he can make, but I'm not feeling 100% confident about this team at the moment, and I think that's why I kind of give them closer to the B minus, whereas, when I started this exercise and when I first looked at this team, I actually thought I was going to give them something closer to B plus. So that's where I'm at.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. And I maybe should move them up to the B minus range, but yeah, still they had a fine season. But moving on, the next team
I will say one more thing. I keep thinking of things at the end. Trading away or Elvis Martinez, I think, is really going to come back to bite them. He is legit. He's legit. I think they traded away. That might have been the best prospect that traded hands at the trade deadline.
It really might have been. I know there's some people who are high on him, crazy high on him. I'm not going to say he's like a top prospect, but I think he's like a top 10, 15 guy, but he's a really solid young guy, and it very well could prove to be the best prospect traded.
Yeah, because I mean, when they're trading away Luisiano, Gore, and him, I think those are top 3 prospects in their farm system, and they traded it away. And you know me, I usually don't really care about trading away your top guys in your farm, but now that I'm starting to care a little more, that something I'm judging.
Yeah, no, that's true. But yeah, the next team we have is Anthony. What did you give him for a grade?
Yeah, I gave Anthony a B. He made the playoffs. And I thought he started the season off really well, but the rest of the season didn't go so hot for him. I think there's a couple of pieces here, Bogarts, Chisholm came up really nicely. Miles Straw, I think, was one of the most underrated pickups of the season. He had a really solid year between Houston and Cleveland. I think with that stolen base potential, it's really going to help. Kyle Tucker is great. I think that Dom Smith and Ramon Laureano should bounce back next year and kind of be solid pieces for him. And Mike Trout will be healthy. I think he found a couple interesting names for this rotation. And I know I kind of, bashed the rotation going into the season saying it wasn't really that good, but like Christian Javier, I'm really high on. Trevor Rogers had a nice season. Kevin Gausman was a nice addition. Alek Manoah really looks like he could be something. I thought he did a great job picking up Jamison Tyone in the middle of the season. After he picked him up, Tyone kind of got it together a bit. I am concerned about Soroka obviously having the setbacks. But I think that there are some solid pieces here. I think he has a couple pieces in the farm that I like. Alec Thomas is definitely one. AJ Puck, I still feel like has some potential, although his stock has maybe gone down a little bit. So really, while I think this roster might be set up slightly worse than Jake and Clayton's moving forward, I think that the fact that Anthony went from a non-playoff team last year to getting back into the playoffs this year probably helps him cement kind of a B grade. Although the more I talk myself, this might more be kind of in that B minus kind of mid range that I gave Clayton and Jake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. So this is going to be the second one where we gave both teams the same grade. I gave Anthony a B. I thought it was a perfectly fine season for him. He started out super hot, kind of in command of the number 2 seed for throughout most of the first half of the season. And he did kind of fall apart down the stretch. But he did end up making the playoffs. He didn't end up going far in the playoffs or anything, but he did make it. We weren't expecting him to make it, and he did. There's definitely a lot of he got blown out kind of badly by Erik, but they exceeded expectations, even though they are the 2-time defending OTP World Series champions. They still the expectations of the rest of us were lower, and they, I think Anthony should be proud of his season. Like you said, guys like Taylor Rogers put together a solid year, and I think he exceeded expectations, and that's a B.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I wish he had done a little more during the season to maybe make some tweaks. I thought Kevin Gosman was like the one big move that he made. I mean, he got Erik Haas as well, but like I would have liked to have seen him acquire another bat or two. Yeah, I think we're both kind of on the same page here with Anthony. We only got one more team before we get to me and you, and I think this is a really interesting one. What did you give EBO?
Yeah. This was the hardest team to give a grade to by far, I would say, and I gave them a C. And I could be convinced to go higher. I could be convinced to go a lot lower. I was kind of between C minus. I ended up with C. I think this team, I mean, they were the defending finals losers. They made it to the finals last year. They were great. And then they made a big drastic move. And I think it didn't definitively not work, but we can certainly say it didn't work the way they thought it would. It worked. It maybe worked, I guess, if you could say that. All of their anti-starting pitcher strategy. And I think maybe it could have been helped out if Zane had been more active throughout the year. But kind of some of that turmoil around him coming or going did hurt this team a little bit. They could have made more moves at the deadline. But again, on the other hand, you could say a lot of that came from the fact that they started out slowly. With not have, I believe they didn't have a win through their first quite a few weeks. Maybe they just had one win for a while. Either way, they tied a lot. They had seven ties, 8, 6, and 7. Just a silly year for a silly team. And there's really no other score to give it but a C.
Yeah, I kind of gave them like a C plus B minus, kind of like the middle there. And if I had to, I think, pick one of them, I'd probably pick the C plus. I mean, I think you're right. They're coming off a season where they made it to the finals and it just kind of fell apart. They played a lot of close matchups. And I just think that I don't necessarily mind a reliever strategy. I think that they need to add a couple very good starting pitchers to make it work. It can't be like, hey, we're going to have Blake Snell and streamers. It's like, hey, we're going to have, one top 15 to 20 starting pitcher and maybe another starting pitcher or two that we like. But then we roster a bunch of relievers. And I don't think they need to have as many relievers as they had last year. I just think they need to identify a core and just throw them out every day with maybe like 1 or 2 backups. But I feel like they got a little too cute at times trying to do the mixing and matching of like a bunch of different relievers in the matchups. And then they often left, some saves and holds on the bench that could have swung some matchups. It just, I don't think it worked. I mean, I think this offense is solid enough. I do think they're a little older. I've talked to Zane a bit, and I think Zane is maybe interested in doing a little bit of retooling, rebuilding. And I think you're right. Like, it's slightly unfair to grade them because Zane didn't really do much with this team, thinking that was kind of a lame duck season for him. And And I mean, honestly, I think you could argue the better grade to give them is just an incomplete, because, had they known they were going to come back, I bet this grade's a hell lot higher. And I kind of get that maybe Zane wasn't in the place where he was ready to kind of take on as active of management of the team during the season as he was previously. So I think giving him like a C plus is kind of like right in the middle of like all the possible grades, where it's like not too high indicating that like they did something particularly well, but not too low, kind of punishing them maybe for they made the playoffs still. I mean, and they lost a very competitive matchup to Conor in the quarterfinals. And, if they win that matchup and they get blown out by me in the semis, hypothetically, I think we're thinking pretty different of their season. So, I initially had them a little higher, actually as high as a B when I kind of went through the first time, and then just, kind of lowered them down as I was thinking about this more and more. So C plus it is. And I think I could be convinced to put him at a B minus.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Certainly. I just think they were a lot less than what we expected them to be. But yeah, up next is my team. And do we want to switch up the order so that I give my score first? And you can do the same for you?
Yeah, I want you to give your score first. I'm curious to see how you rank yourself.
Okay, I gave myself a B plus. I think I was expecting to be the 3 seed, and I finished as the 2 seed. So I exceeded expectations there. And I think my team was a little bit better than I thought it would be, so it gets a B plus for me. I got that first round bye. I did lose in the first round in the semifinals, but it was a very tight matchup. It really could have gone the other way, possibly. So it was frustrating that despite being the 2 seed, I didn't make the finals. But with that being said, I got a lot of big steps forward from a lot of guys, most notably Vlad, putting together just an absurdly good season. And then Juan Soto was great. Jonathan India was my big breakout guy for the year. He was a guy that could have been cut at a couple points. And then the Gene Segura move turned out to be good for me. I acquired Jake McGee for cheap. He got me some saves. Shane McClanahan came up for me also. Him and India were my 2 guys who came up and performed. But on the other hand, Jared Kelnick came up and did not perform. So that hurts. And then I guess you could say there were some issues with the bullpen, some issues with my middle infield, with Lindor not performing super well. And then Rizzo was fine, but not amazing. So there's some guys who took steps back. Trent Grisham kind of fell apart down the stretch. But I think there are more guys who stepped forward than stepped back. I haven't even mentioned Chris Bryant or AJ Pollock. But I think my team had a really solid season. I'm proud of them. And I think a B plus is appropriate. Had I made the finals, things would be different. So I guess really the difference between a B plus and an A minus was just a couple categories flipping against Erik. But I'm very happy with my team, and I did a respectable job.
Yeah, interesting. You said that a couple categories was enough to give you an A minus, because I gave you an A minus.
Hey.
I mean, like you said, you exceeded expectations of the seeding. You came in thinking you'd be a 3, and you got a 2. You got the first round bye. I'm not holding the semis loss against Erik to you maybe as strongly, just because I thought you were 2 very evenly matched teams, and I thought that was pretty much a coin flip. But really, a lot of what this grade is just how a lot of your players performed. Vlad broke out. Like you said, Segura had a really solid season. India had a very solid season. Juan Soto was elite as always. AJ Pollock deal really paid off for you. Wheeler were very good. Shane McClanahan came up and was very solid. I thought the Tyler Mahle deal got you a pretty solid starting pitcher. This is not to say there weren't disappointments. You Darvish and Hyun-Jin Ryu, like you really need to figure out what to do with them in the offseason. Trevor Bauer, obviously, that really hurt your rotation. Sean Manaea was a bit of a mixed bag after you acquired him. I thought Jake McGee was a solid pickup. And the bullpen, Adam Frazier was a nice pickup. And then the other thing I will say too, though, is you did have a lot of your top prospects maybe struggle a little bit to start out with. Joe Adele, Alec Bohm did not have that good of a year. Kelenic obviously struggled a bit, but I think you set yourself up very nicely. I thought that your window is just kind of opening. I'm not necessarily that concerned in the long run for you. And while it probably was a bit disappointing for you to lose in the semis, I think for the most part, your team kind of did what you asked them to. And maybe the couple of, slow starts from your top prospects, some of the disappointments from certain members of your rotation, I think those were kind of the two factors that led me to give you an A-. Although I think this is an A- that's closer to a B+, and an A- that's closer to an A. So I feel like we're kind of roughly at the same idea of where your team is at moving forward.
Yeah, I think so too. And it comes down to maybe me being having a harsher scale than you did on this.
Yeah. Well, speaking of harsher scales, that's a good segue. I'm curious to see if you think this is harsh or where you put or where you think. I gave myself a B. I loved my regular season in terms of the record. What I didn't love was this team didn't feel as dominant as the last full season I had, where I was also the number one seed. That was the 2019 season. I think in that season, I pretty much was consistently winning 8 or more categories a week or 9 or more categories a week. And my wins, there weren't a lot of close matchups, but there was a lot of close wins this year. I had a similar number of losses as that year, but I did have the one blowout loss to you. And my losses that year were all very close. I did have a couple close losses this year as well. And I think the big kicker was, losing in the semis after winning the finals. I'm sitting right here staring at that empty spot where the trophy had been sitting for a year and it's no longer there. So, I couldn't give myself that high of a rating justified, after seeing that. That being said, the Tatis acquisition, was a home run. He was a lot better than Trevor Story was this year. I know Jose Barrios was solid. But I'm really happy about having Tatis as the franchise cornerstone of my team for the next decade. Correa really had a good year. As in most of my infield, honestly, Freddie Freeman picked it up after a slow start. Altuve was the same solid start. Pete Alonso was solid. Matt Chapman really picked it up. Catcher was a bit of a sore spot, but my outfield was a bit of a disappointment, I'd say. Yelich really needs to get back on track. That back injury, I think kind of hindered him again this year. And I'm going to give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, but I am still worried. Springer and Muncy were great offseason acquisitions, although Springer had a hard time staying healthy. Castellanos kind of took over that number one outfield role for me. Austin Meadows is a little bit polarizing this year. He was 3rd or 4th in the AL and RBIs, but I feel like the Rays benched him a bit more than they should because they wanted to play the matchups. Ketel Marte was hurt quite a bit, but when he was healthy, he was on. My rotation was a bit interesting this year. The sticky stuff kind of affected Cole or the ban of it a bit, but he kind of rated this ship. Fried was elite in the second half. Woodruff exceeded expectations. Flaherty was really good when healthy, but he wasn't really that healthy often. Aaron Nola had elite peripherals, but the ERA just didn't match it. I think he's going to bounce back next year. what a pickup Adam Wainwright was in the middle of the year. I mean, I think he really stabilized my rotation down the stretch. Kyle Hendricks was a bit of a disappointment, but a lot of that was kind of concentrated in like 6 or 7 starts, but obviously those were killer. Sonny Gray was decent. Jose Urquidy was solid when healthy. I really like the bullpen that I was able to put together by the end of the season. I mean, Gallegos and Trinan were the top picks for Holds guys. Will Smith, Bryce Iglesias were solid saves guys. And I really like Lois Saiga and Whitlock moving forward. So the Dansby Swanson acquisition didn't quite work out. Biggio didn't quite work out. Brantley was decent, but I think my farm's improving a little bit. So I do think the future for my team is still bright. And for the most part, these guys are still kind of in their prime, pretty young. I've made it an emphasis to trade away a lot of the older guys, but it's just hard for me to, justify giving my team higher than a B, coming off a finals win and then, losing in a semis matchup where I was heavily favored. But I do want to emphasize that one matchup where I probably win, 70 to 80% of the time is not going to be something I'm going to define my entire season on. So, that's why I'm not giving myself something in like the C range.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I also gave you a B actually. Okay. So that's 3 that we've given the same grade for. Yep. I think your team was kind of championship or bust going into the year. They did not win the championship. And you made the point that they didn't look as dominant as they had in previous years, which is certainly true, but also I think other teams looked better. So kind of the 3 through 5 kind of range looked better than they have in the past. So that's not exactly an indictment against you. But still I guess to recap, you started out dominant. You didn't lose a single game your first half, but you did kind of slump down the stretch. You lost 3 and tied 1 the remainder of the season. And with that, and that was kind of after most of your injuries had kind of cleared up. Your big injury stretch was earlier on in the year when you were still winning games. But so the second half wasn't as great for your team. And then you ended up, as we all know, losing to Conor in the semis. So there are definitely things to improve on for your team. You weren't that force, and then guys like Chapman didn't have a great season, and Sean Murphy wasn't as good as you thought he'd be. And yeah, Austin Meadows, like you said, and that does balance out breakouts from guys like Muncy and I mean, Tatis obviously and Correa's bounced back. But there's kind of a lot that you're going to need to do, and you're low key in a tough spot despite being still the best team in the league. I would say that you're still the best team. That's not up for debate. But there's a lot of decisions you're going to have to make, and if you had won a second straight title, it would have made those decisions easier.
Yeah, I mean, maybe slightly to rebut some of the points that you'd made. I mean, despite, like you said, some of these teams have gotten better, but despite that, other than losing to Conor in the semis in the regular season, I only had 1 loss to a playoff team. That was you. I did, but 3 weeks or 4 weeks before I played Conor, I beat Erik 11-1. I definitely do have some tough decisions to make, but, I feel like I've been able to kind of make a lot of trades with a little in this league. So I'm not necessarily worried about maybe being able to make some of these decisions to retool. And I think you and I would both agree that, I mean, this is still a very solid core. I mean, there are a lot of players on here that, are, championship winning players. But I think you're right. I need to constantly kind of be evolving this team. I feel like I'm constantly learning. I'm putting a little more emphasis into building up the farm system. I mean, as you notice, this is the first time where I said that there were certain prospects I wouldn't trade, and I actually held on to those certain prospects. Pete Crow Armstrong and Gunnar Henderson, to name a couple of them. So we'll see what happens. I certainly, think I'm going to be right back in the thick of things to contend for a championship next year. And I still do think I have one of the top, if not the top team. I think the regular season record proved that. But I think you're right. I think the gap is starting to close between the top teams and the bottom teams. And, if I'm just going to sit here complacent with this team next year, things aren't going to turn out as well. So there's a lot of good to take away from the season, but also a lot that I definitely need to improve on.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah. And don't let a sour ending spoil how good of a regular season you had. There's you're going to be fine going forward for sure. And if some of your players have setbacks, you're gonna make moves. I'm confident.
Yeah.
But moving on to the next one. It's Conor who's gonna give their grade first.
Why don't you give your grade first? Because I just talked about my team ad nauseum.
Okay, well, I gave Conor an A+. This was a pretty easy grade. Conor made a flurry of moves in the offseason, more like a hurricane of moves in the offseason. And then throughout the season, too, he made great moves at every turn. In the offseason, he acquired Ryan McMahon. We were surprised by that. He was great, and then he flipped Ryan McMahon when his value was at a peak. And he got Sal Perez. Sal Perez literally single-handedly brought him to the finals. And to that point, Conor was in the finals. I was thinking that he could maybe be like in a fight for a playoff spot, and that felt really optimistic of me. But he got the 4 seed. He beat you in the playoffs. He made the finals, and he was one of the top teams all year. I'm very impressed with Conor's team. I know he is too. And it looks solid for the future. I mean, Moncada's a great guy to build a team around. Jorge Polanco had a good year. Andrew Vaughn didn't have exactly the breakout year we thought he would. His lineup's a little worse than I was kind of thinking it would be looking at it. But Byron Buxton, if he ever stays healthy, is going to be good. Alex Verdugo kind of broke out this year. And his rotation is really where it shines. Lucas Giolito is terrific. Marcus Stroman was a good acquisition. Carlos Rodon was a great pickup. Wade Miley, he maybe gave up too much for him, but he had a solid year. Robbie Ray, of course, obviously. How could I forget him? And really, I think Conor, his farm system certainly has taken a hit, but he's in the finals and his time is now. And I think he can be a good team for the next little while here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I gave him an A+ for all the same reasons that you did. It's funny. I was looking back at the Hurricane Conor trades, and I think one of the trades we really bashed was Kibu Mauricio in 2021 second for McMahon and Edmund. I don't think either of us were particularly high on McMahon or Edmund, and both of them have really solid seasons. I think the one thing that really solidified this grade for me was if you look at not just the Sal Perez deal, but if you look at that in tandem with the Robbie Ray deal, he acquired a better starting pitcher in Robbie Ray for less than he got in return for Jose Barrios. And while I think there's some risk with Robbie Ray moving forward, who knows if he's going to be able to replicate the season that he had. It worked for him this year. Sal Perez, was elite down the stretch, as was Robbie Ray. I've talked about earlier where if I was able to get Salvador Perez instead of him, where, I was kind of the favorite until he swooped in with Barrios, I would have won our semifinals matchup. And it'd be a really different looking season right now. We'd be having a very different conversation. So it's just amazing. I feel like he made all the right moves. The only move he made this season that really I didn't like was getting Kyle Gibson for DL Hall. Like, I think he probably gave up a little too much there, but like he did everything else right. And it's funny because I feel like a lot of the times we seem to be a little lower on his trades. But I feel like every time, I look down and it's like it kind of worked out for him. So kudos to Conor, A plus, well deserved. I'm really curious how he's going to build off of this finals appearance. I'm assuming he's going to continue to be aggressive. I think that that's the right move. And I mean, I'm really excited for the direction of this team. The one thing I'll be curious to see, though, is I feel like throughout the season, there's this top tier with Yuki and Erik. Is he going to be able to come back next year and repeat this performance and join that tier? Because I definitely think he's the fourth best team in this league, and I don't think it's particularly close. But I don't 100% know if he has jumped that tier yet.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say he's jumped into that tier, but I think it's certainly his place to lose as a top 4 team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, let's move on to the champion here. I mean, I give Erik an A plus. He went from missing the playoffs to winning the championship, his 3rd championship in 4 years. He made a lot of shrewd acquisitions throughout the season, both through the free agent market and through trades to kind of build this up. And I feel like I had some complaints early in the year that like, hey, like, his roster doesn't really have a bunch of like these guys who are like really solid, like dependable assets. And I looked at his team by the end of the year, and for the most part, his lineup kind of filled out with those guys like Whit Merrifield, Jose Ramirez, Wander Franco, Stanton, Jared Walsh, Teoscar Hernandez, Tyler O'Neill, who's a great free agent pickup, Chris Taylor, Bobby Dahlbeck, who I think has a bright future, Shohei Ohtani, obviously, Jesse Winker. And at a rotation, too, I mean, Corbin Burns, I think, is a good chance of winning the NL Cy Young. You got Joe Musgrove, Scherzer, Lynn, Sale, Pablo Lopez. I mean, I think that rotation's a little on the older side. I mean, Dylan Cease also solid there, too. But, like, he won a championship after missing the playoffs, and there's a lot of solid pieces here. I mean, I think it's pretty simple. He gets an A+. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, no, this was an easy one. He gets an A+ for me. I think he proved a lot of people wrong. Going into the season, we kind of had him in the 5-6 range. We were unsure as to how this team would shape up, if they would be a playoff team, if they would be a serious contender. And Erik just kind of worked his Erik magic. He went into the playoffs as the 3 seed and won the finals. And I wouldn't feel comfortable saying he is the best team right now, since playoffs can be fluky. And I think you have a better track record with the current roster than he does. But he really did. Not only did he win the playoffs, he dominated the playoffs. None of his matchups had a close final score. I know my matchup with him, a lot of categories were close. But really, he just kind of rolled. And he has Wander Franco now for the next 20 years, unless he trades him. And this team,
he's never trading him.
Yeah. The way with his strategy, he's able to kind of cycle through a lot of people and, I don't know, pick up a couple of guys along the way, kind of like a snowball rolling downhill and picking up twigs along the way, and some players, Tyler O'Neill is a twig. And I guess Jose Ramirez was already in the snowball. I think this is making sense. Essentially my point is, he's cycling through guys at a rapid pace at the bottom of his roster, but every once in a while a guy stays on the roster. And now his base roster is a little bit better than it just was. And at the end of the season, if you keep doing that, then you've got Jared Walsh and you've got Tyler O'Neill and you've got, I don't know, maybe Lane Thomas sticks around. I know he had a great playoffs. And a couple other guys too. This team really, it only has a couple stars on paper. And like you said, the rotation is a little old and maybe concerning. And there's still, I don't know. Do I think on paper this team is a top 3 team for next year? On paper, who's to say? But I've kind of got more trust in Erik getting it done in the future than I did going into this year. So I think his strategy has proven itself.
No, I definitely think he's a top 3 team. I mean, I think my thing with
I think let me clarify. He's a top 3 team. I think if we were doing power rankings right now, I'd give him 2. But on paper, would I say he's a top 3 team? Who knows? Like, look, the guys on his is it a top 3 roster on paper? Kind of ignoring everything else that he does. I don't know, but I'm saying I'm giving more credit to the intangibles than I would have last year.
No, I think that's very fair, and I think you know, he does a better job of managing the roster than anybody else, and that goes a long way. And like I said, when you looked at this roster at the beginning of the season, it's a lot more barren. When you look at it now, he really found some guys that, you know, we weren't expecting to break out earlier. So kudos to him for identifying some of those guys. I mean, he almost has like the Rays approach. I feel like he makes a lot out of nothing. It's interesting because I feel like he makes a lot out of nothing with like the free agency market. And I think I make a lot out of nothing with the trade market with like some of the assets that I'm just able to flip and I end up getting the types of guys that I want. So 2 very different ways of building a team. And I think there's a debate as to like what's better in the playoffs. Is it the flexibility that he's able to maintain to maybe pick up some of these hotter guys, or does it come back to bite him when he's trusting some of these guys who don't really have the track record and you know, maybe things don't quite work out. So far for him, you know, 3 or 4 times it's worked out that, you know, these guys without track records, have come in and helped him win a championship. But there's also the downside, which you see in the Roto regular season, in which, you know, he just missed the playoffs entirely. So, you know, I think that there's a little more variance there. The other thing I'll say to this too is, you know, between you, me, and Erik had the worst record against the two, like against the group of us than we did. Like, you know, I swept Erik and split against you. So like, you know, a month before the playoffs started, I beat Erik 11-1. So I think part of this too often just comes down to timing. You know, some teams get really hot in the playoffs. Conor's team got really hot in the playoffs. Does that mean he's better than my team or your team? I don't think so. So, you know, it's you know, some of this just ends up coming down to luck. But I mean, a lot of it is skill. This is not to detract from what Erik did at all, because Erik has managed as a team better than anybody else, and he deserved this championship. He did great, but I think more of the point I'm trying to make is it's just like we can't automatically equate championship with best team necessarily every year. And I think you're seeing this in the real MLB right now. The Braves won 88 games. I said at the beginning of the broadcast, I thought they were the one team that was left in the NL playoffs I didn't think was going to make it, and they made it. Does that mean they're a better team than the Dodgers or the Giants? I don't think so. So, you know, timing can be everything. And Erik knows how to manipulate timing better than any of us with some of these players. So that certainly helps.
Yeah, no, Erik runs a high variance team, I would say.
Yeah.
And it certainly helped him a lot. And I mean, you know, fantasy baseball is a whole bunch of small sample sizes. So really, who's to say if something that's worked is good, and if something that hasn't worked is bad? I mean, there's some things that are obvious, like having 17 catchers in your organization is probably not good. But you know, it's really all a matter of preference. And if you're comfortable with what you're doing, and if what you're doing causes you to go out and make good moves and really just go out and have a good time, then you do you.
Yeah, exactly. I have a lot more fun building a dominant major league roster that I could look at immediately than, you know, necessarily having the patience to build up with some of these prospects. But I also recognize the need to like not just be like, I'm going to acquire a bunch of 35-year-olds. You know, I try to acquire players like Tatis who are young. You know, Brandon Woodruff was a young starter. You know, Kevin Biggio didn't really work out, but he's young. Matt Chapman is a young guy that I traded for. Pete Alonso. You know, so there are ways to balance all these different strategies, and it's just really what works for everyone. But I think that's what's the beauty of dynasty baseball more than the other dynasty leagues, where I feel like there's more kind of set strategies. Here, we had 6 playoff teams with 6 very different strategies. EBO went all in on relievers. I mean, we've talked ad nauseum about Erik's strategy. You go more prospect heavy. I go very much not prospect heavy, and I want to get a bunch of established stars. So I think that's the beauty of all this. There are different ways to win, and everybody has a different approach, and I think that's what makes this league fun.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that's fun for me is acquiring a bunch of great guys and then seeing them wreck in the majors after getting called up like India and McClanahan have. And it's just a lot of fun. We all play it. We all love the league. And it's just, there's so much diversity in terms of play style in this league, and that makes it a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I wouldn't change it for anything.
No way. No. But yeah, is there anything else that we want to talk about here before we go? Anything about any of the teams? Anything we need to say about the league or about our grades?
No. One thing I wanted to do just to wrap up, so it's all in one place, was I just wanted to read out all the grades quickly that we gave everyone, just so we all have the context all in one place for how you and I kind of voted. So for Daniel and Greg, I gave him a C-. You gave him a D+. For Yuki, I gave him a D-. You gave him a D+. You and I both gave Andrew a B+. I gave Alex and Zach a B. You gave them a C+. I gave Ruthvik and Nick a C. You gave them an F. I gave Jake and Clayton kind of a B, B-, kind of on that line. You gave them a C+. I gave Anthony the same grade as Clayton and Jake, B, B- line. You gave him a B. I gave EBO a C+. You gave him a C. I gave you an A-. You gave yourself a B+. You and I both gave me a B. And we both gave Conor and Erik A+. So with the exception of Yuki, you were a much more stringent grader than I was.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And I'm not, and maybe not what I would have expected coming into this this endeavor.
No, me neither. Grading subjective, we use slightly different scales. I mean, I think a lot of times we had similar opinions, just use different letters. But yeah, definitely interesting. That was kind of the reason I wanted to read it back, just to kind of note that disparity. But yeah, that's all I had. Glad we got to do this. And boy, we'll have to come up with like a Halloween themed episode next week. Something spooky.
Yes, spooky, scary. Yeah, it's gonna be great. Yeah, thank you again for doing this with me. Thank you all for listening, and don't forget to check out my appearance on Who Cares You Suck, the M-SABR Dynasty Hockey podcast. That I had a lot of fun recording that, and it should be up already.
Oh man, yeah, I'm excited. They do a great job over there with the hockey podcast, and I'm excited to hear your segment. Hopefully you had some nice things to say about Tristan Jarry, because he deserves them.
I had no things to say about him.
You are a disappointment. One of these days I'll get you to say something nice about Tristan Jarry and Heriberto.
Oh no.
Well, I'll leave it on that Heriberto note.
All right, leaving it on Heriberto. See you guys.
See ya.
Somewhere in the basement I once had a good idea, but I can't find it. My mind is drawing blanks to fill the page. I still won't make the grade. Still won't make the grade.
This podcast is good.